Today, I'm gonna rank every chess tactic there is, and a tactic is simply a sequence of moves that land you some sort of advantage. At number 54, I have the Alekhine's Gun, which is when you bring your queen behind two of your rooks to get this super strong battery. This can be good if you really need to like supercharge on a single piece, but the problem I have this is that it is exceedingly extraordinarily rare, as in I have never seen this a single time, and also it is just really slow to move all of your rooks and queen into this formation. Really, it's way too rare, it will almost never happen, and as such, this is where it's going. Number 53, I have Under Promotion. This happens when you promote your pawn, but instead of going to a queen like normal, you promote either into a knight, rook, or a bishop. This can be useful if you need some tactic with the knight, or you potentially need to avoid stalemate, like here, if you go into a queen, the king cannot move anywhere, it's stalemate, so instead a rook is better, the king moves here, and then you have checkmate. It's really the same problem. It can be useful sometimes, usually just to taunt your opponent, but really the actual scenario where you would use this is so rare you almost never see it. Number 52, I have the cross check, which happens when your opponent checks you and you stop the check by blocking and initiating a counter check. And here, after black moves, we could simply take the rook and we're winning. And whilst can be useful sometimes, my main problem with it is it's not really something that we can control. With a lot of tactics, like we are the aggressors, with this one, we really have no control over whether black is going to make that check or not, along with the fact that, once again, it is very, very rare. Overall, it's really just something you can never depend on, and so this is where it goes. Number 51, I have the King Fork, which is simply a fork where you attack two pieces done with the king. This one is problematic for a couple of reasons. One, if you are ever putting your king out in a position where it is attacking two pieces, it must be in the endgame, and really at any time you're putting your king always in some sort of danger, which is really never a good thing to be doing, along with the fact that it is also very rare. It's overall just not that good of a tactic. At number 50, I have the Trapped Piece, which is when an enemy has no safe squares to go to, and you can play a move like g4 here, simply attacking them and they cannot go anywhere safe. While this is a very fun tactic and I love when I get it, it really doesn't come that often. A lot of times you'll see these awesome queen traps, but really how many times has it happened to you? And as you go higher in levels, people do this a lot less as they are more aware of where all their pieces can go, but it still does have a good amount of value. 49, I have various stalemate tactics. This is when you are in a worse position like here. However, because you've gotten yourself trapped essentially, you can play a move like rook of 8 check, king moves up, and now another check. And it doesn't matter that like your rook here can be captured because you just have a stalemate and a draw. This one can be fun. However, once again, there's a problem with it being very rare. Also here, you must already be in a worse position to even use this tactic, which really limits it, as, I mean, if you're doing better, which you should be trying to do, then this will never ever come in handy, which isn't great. Overall though, it does have some value, but still very rare and not very practical. 48, I have the hit and run tactic. This occurs when you have a piece that is hanging that is also attacking another piece, and what you can do here is capture something else that defends your queen. That was a lot of words. Let me show you what I mean. Here, you can capture the bishop on c4. The reason you can play this is that now, if they capture your queen, you can simply take back, you have won a piece. However, if they, back here, they try to take your rook, well then now this guy is no longer defended, and you can take him. Very fun tactic. Once again, my main problem here is that it simply is not going to occur that often. However, it is a very fun sacrifice and one you should definitely look out for in your games. 47, I have the Windmill, which is when you have two pieces, usually a bishop and a rook, looking at the enemy king, and here what you can do is you can capture their pawn of check, king walks over, and here you can move and capture a piece with a discovered check, and the point here is that after they move, you can go right back to where you were before, the exact same position, and you've now opened it up a little bit for yourself. So after the king moves, now you can take the bishop. King only has one option, has to move right back, and here, another check. King has to move again, you can take again. You see the point, you can basically go back and forth with your rook. Very fun. My biggest problem with this one is that from the black side, this is quite obvious to see, and as such, not a lot of people are going to end up falling for this, as it is quite easy to predict and end up preventing. However, it is still quite strong. 46, I have perpetual check, which is when you're in usually a worse position, you can go ahead and basically just check their king forever. And here, after the king runs, you can give them another check. And the point here is that even if they are like in a better position, if they cannot escape the checks, then sooner or later it must fall into the threefold repetition, meaning it is a draw. And whilst can be fun, once again, it's not that rare. It is usually quite easy to prevent. However, on the plus side, it can save you from a bad position, but it's also a minus because this will only really be useful when you are in a worse position. Overall, it's probably fine. Number 45, I have the interference, which is when your opponent has one of their pieces defending another one, and you can play a move like b5 here. This interferes with their defense, and after, like, they capture here, you can go ahead, take the rook, and you are doing quite well. Same problem I had for a lot of these. This one just isn't that common. It's not going to come up that much in your games. However, it is still a decent tactic. Number 44, I have the Scholar's Mate, which refers to the very common and very famous 4-move checkmate with the bishop and the queen. This usually also refers to a more broader version of the queen and the bishop, and potentially also the knight coming in to really attack f7 as fast as possible, usually with a checkmate idea. This can be good in certain situations, but usually here in this like very raw form with the 4-move checkmate like so, it's not usually going to work very well past the beginner level. However, it has its place, and where it does well. At number 43, I have the clearance tactic, which occurs when you have one of your own pieces in the way of your other pieces coming in, so you can sacrifice that piece, usually with a check, and after they respond, now your pieces can come in where they need to, and you are doing quite well. This one usually occurs in the midst of a big attack like you have here. Usually this can be prevented by the black side, however it can be devastating when it happens, so keep this one in your mind. 42, I have the deflection. This one goes by a couple of names, also attraction, distraction, a couple of names. The point here is when you want a piece to get away from another one. Like here, you have this pressure on their queen, so you can attract their king away or deflect it, or whatever you want to call it, by playing bishop takes on f2 check here. Now, if they take here, then you've done your job well. That is a free queen. Also in this position, if they play king e2, then you have a skewer with bishop g4, which is a nice little bonus. But yeah, that is the deflection tactic. It's fun, nothing too much, not too complicated. Let's move on. 41, I have the Greek gift sacrifice. There are a couple of versions of this one, and this is very powerful. It occurs when the enemy king has castled, they have no knight protecting f6, and you have your pieces in this formation. There's a couple of small differences, but this is the main formation, and you can sack your bishop on h7 here, king takes, and then come in with your knight. And the point here is that with just these two pieces basically, and also this one as well, their king is not going to be able to survive. And after, like, if they go here, queen can come in, quick checkmate. It's already very bad, and no matter what they do, they're going to end up losing. This one is always extremely brutal, and I'm always so happy when I get it. Really, its flaw is that is just rare. If this was more common, it might even be number 1. However, there it is. Number 40, I have the queen pin, which quite simply is a pin being done by the queen. It's really the weakest out of all the pins, just because the queen is really only going to be doing a good pin if the piece behind it is either hanging like it is here, or is higher value, which will never happen because it is a queen, so the piece behind it must be hanging, meaning that it is almost always easily remedied by like a piece being simply defended. Like here, black could play like rook b8, defend the queen, and all our hopes kind of go down the drain. It still does have some good tactical potential, but overall is not that great. 39, I have the rook fork, which quite simply is a fork being done by the rook. Other than the king, because it is just terrible, this I deem to be the worst of the forks, not because it's really bad. I mean, if done well, it can be devastating, but really purely because it is quite rare. You have to have very specific situations like this one. It really almost only happens in endgames as well, which is not a big help either. Not bad, not too good. Let's move on. 38, I have pawn structure destruction, which is when you sacrifice usually a piece to basically just destroy your enemy's entire defenses. All of their pawns gone, even though here you are down like 1 point of material. By destroying their king side's pawn, they are now in an attack that is basically impossible to stop. Once again, this one can be really brutal if done right. However, a lot of people like to try and sacrifice when usually it doesn't work. You have to be very careful on when to actually do this. And also, from the other side here, like if you're black, if you don't want to have to like go down, deal with the attack, all you have to do is literally just not capture. You can completely ignore this, go c5, and even though here you might still be down a pawn, you can completely ignore the tactic, which is very annoying. However, it is still a good tactic. 37, I have the bishop fork, which I mean is basically what it is. It is a fork done with the bishop. It's still quite niche. It does not happen that often. However, I do think it is a decent tactic. I think it happens a lot more in middle games and something else like the rook tactics. However, playing on these diagonals is definitely not something that is super easy to do, not like very easy tactics to spot. It is still quite good, however, so this is where it's going. 36, I have the X-ray, which is essentially when you defend or attack a piece or square through a piece. Like here, this is my favorite example of this. It looks like we cannot capture the bishop because then black can come in, and it looks like we're getting checkmated. However, this is not the case. If we capture, then yeah, here we are getting checkmated. However, if you rely on X-ray defense, you can back the rook up to e1, and now both the rooks defend each other, there's no mate, and you are winning. So that is one example of the X-ray. My main problem here is that it just doesn't occur that often. However, when it does, like right here, it can be life-saving, and it often is the game-deciding factor. So while strong, it doesn't happen that often. 35, I have overloading the defender, which is when black simply can... 35, I have overloading the defender, which is when the enemy has too many things they're defending with a single piece, and we can overload them. In this position, black is defending two very important things with this knight, both their rook and the vital c7 pawn. And here, yes, we can just take their knight, but we have checkmate in 2 by capturing the rook, which looks insane, but the point here is we are overloading the defender, because after they take... well, now c7 is no longer hanging. We can simply, or now it is hanging, we can capture with a very quick checkmate. So you can see here, the knight was overloaded, and we completely destroyed them using this. Doesn't occur that often. However, once again, when it does happen, it usually is completely devastating. 34, I have the situational pin. This is kind of like a tactical pin, it's not direct. Here, we can play the move rook c1. And here, we attack the knight, and although we don't have a literal pin on it, we kind of have a tactical pin, because we're not really, like, attacking a piece behind it, we're attacking the square behind it, as in if they move their knight, then we can come in onto that square, they get skewered, and they lose their rook. This is a fun tactic which might be a bit hard to spot, so it can get a bit grimy, a little bit not so good if you're not careful. However, this does prove to be quite strong, but once again, not too common, and so this is where it's going. Number 33, I have a smothering, which is when you attack a piece that has no legal moves that it can go to. It is completely and utterly trapped. It is most common in knight forks like this, where, the piece just cannot go anywhere and you are going to capture it on the next move. It can also happen in checkmate sometimes, but those are very, very rare. This is more common, and overall it is quite good, especially in this specific knight situation. I've had this many times. Overall though, it's a fine tactic. There's nothing too special about it. Number 32, I have the queen fork. What to say, it's a very strong fork, very, very strong in endgames where, everything is just wide open, so pieces can be captured super easily like so. However, in middle games, and especially openings, queen forks basically never happen just because the position would be so much more closed, and as such, if you're in an endgame, really watch out for this. However, if you're in the middle game or opening, this is basically useless. 31, I have the decoy. This is one of my favorite endgame ideas. This is essentially when the black king or the enemy king here is really being annoying, and what we can do here is you can send a decoy on the other side of the board like here. 31, I have the decoy. This is essentially when you want to get the enemy king out of the way. You can sacrifice a pawn by playing a move here like h3, and after takes. The problem here for black now is that while they need to control this guy, they also need to go run across the side of the board and get this guy. So what we can play here now is simply h4. King must keep running to go ahead and catch up to the pawn, while we can now play b4. And now we have the termite, jaws, pincers, and they're going to die a very brutal death now. This occurs in a lot of endgames, and it is one of my favorite endgame tactics. My problem with it though is that one, obviously it only happens in endgames, so it's not super common, and also if black has any other pieces on the board, this is strictly a pawn endgame. If they have a knight here, this tactical idea might not work very well. However, it still is quite very good. Number 30, I have rooks on the 7th. This is essentially when you can infiltrate your rooks into the enemy position, and with that, if you have both your rooks on the 7th rank, this is going to be an absolute monster and extremely good in so many attacking ideas. I would have put this a lot higher, and if you're a beginner, this should be top 5 for you. My problem here is that as you go higher, people are not going to let you infiltrate your rook in, and it gets to a point where people are so good that it is basically impossible for you to actually get your rook in like this and for it to be so successful. However, if you're not an advanced player, if you're still a beginner, keep this idea in mind because it is extremely strong. Number 29, I have the passed pawns. This refers to all the tactics that you can play with an advanced passed pawns. This refers to knights, rooks, just kings, whatever. Here, one nice tactic is rook over to a8. Very good tactic to keep in mind. I've executed this a couple of times. The point is, now we're going to promote here, and if black tries to capture, then rook to a7 check, and they get promptly skewered. These ideas are very great to keep in mind. Obviously, if you have an advanced passed pawn, these are a must to know. However, most of the time, these are simply not going to be necessary, so it is going to be docked a couple of points. However, these are still very important and very strong and something you should definitely know. 28, I have the Desperado. This refers to when something happens, you capture a piece, and let's say in this position, black tries to take your rook first. Now, normally here, you would simply take back right away, but this doesn't really work because after knight takes back, this is just an even position. It's not that great. So what you can do instead is before you capture back, you can play a Desperado and sacrifice your knight for everything that it is worth. Here, you can actually take the knight and get a full piece in return, but even if, imagine this was a pawn, you could still capture it, because at the end of the day, you would still end up winning a pawn. But here, after you capture their knight of check, they take back, and you take this, you're just up a piece, you are doing well. Desperados happen, more common than people think. However, it still isn't that common. However, it is a good tactic and definitely something that you should keep in mind. 27, I have tempo tactics. This comes in this position. 27, I have tempo tactics. To explain it, let's take a look at this position. Let's say white tries b4 here. They try to attack our queen. If here we just like back up, then white can just play a confident bishop c5, and they are completely fine here. They really have no problems. Instead, what we can do is we can move our queen with tempo. Here we can play queen h5, threatening checkmate in 1 on h2, something they must respond to. So here they must play like h3, at which point now we can simply take an e3. The point being, if they take our queen, we can just take back, we're up a piece. And if they try taking here, then we now have bishop d4, and they get pinned into absolute oblivion. But the point here is this would not be possible without the move queen h5, which comes with tempo. This occurs probably more often than you think. There are a lot of times where having this one tempo is very important, and so this is where it's going. 26, I have the absolute pin. I mean, really not too much to say. An absolute pin is when you pin a piece against their king, meaning they cannot move the piece anywhere at all because they would lose their king. I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong here. It's just a absolute pin. Let's move on. At number 25, I have the rook pin. I mean, yeah, not too much to say here. It is a pin being done by the rook. This is very useful, especially in endgames and also middle games too. It can be very, very strong, but overall, it doesn't come up that often. 24, I have the rook battery. This is a battery with 2 rooks like so. This is very good if you want to like have a ton of control over something like the c file in this example, or really also if you can get both your rooks onto the 7th rank. That can also be an extremely strong battery, especially in a lot of attacking ideas. Yeah, not so much to say, it's just good. 23, I have various weaknesses and attacks on the f7 or f2 squares, especially in the opening. This is such a critical square and can lead to so many great attacks, especially early on. My problem I have is that the later you go in chess, the higher rating you get. People know how to deal with this, and you get to a point where you can't really get that many tactics to actually happen with it. However, overall, this is very strong, and if you're a beginner, definitely a big tactic that you should keep in mind. 22, I have the double check. This occurs when you play a move that lets 2 pieces checking the enemy king at the exact same time. This is so powerful, mostly because when you have this, the only move that black can make is moving their king, or the enemy can only move their king. Blocking is never really possible because you're always being checked from 2 different places, and in this example, after the move over here, your rook could come in with checkmate, and if they move to c7, then the bishop could come in instead with, once again, a checkmate. So you can see how powerful this can be, and especially in a lot of attacking ideas, this can be insanely strong. My problem I have with it is that it is like pretty choreographed, meaning that it's not that too hard to see. Like from the black side here, if you had an extra move here, this would be pretty obvious to see, and to try and prevent against isn't always that difficult. Overall though, it is still very strong. 21, I have the bishop queen battery, meaning a battery made up of the queen and the bishop. This is such a core attacking idea, especially when you're attacking enemy king that has already castled. And here when it threatens like a checkmate, it always ends up forcing like some weakness. Like here, black might have to go like g6, and at this point now there are a ton of holes that we can get into and start poking at their king. And also this one pretty much never gets weak. At every stage of the game, if you are attacking them, this is always going to be a core and important idea. At number 20, I have the skewer. This is when you attack an enemy piece that is very strong, meaning it must move out of the way and letting you get the weaker piece that was behind it. This doesn't occur as often as something like, say, a fork or a pin. However, it still does happen a lot and is very important at basically every stage of the game. At number 19, I have the Zwischenzug. This is a German word that refers to an in-between move. Like in this puzzle, you can play the insane-looking knight takes d5, which looks very bad, but the idea here is you open up this attack against their queen, so they're probably going to capture you now. And here, most people will just capture back right away, allowing black to take on d5, and now you're down a piece and very sad. So instead what you can do is you can play an in-between move. You can play knight takes on e7 check first. That way, you've played an in-between move. You don't have to capture right away with a check, and after the move over, now you can go ahead and capture their queen, and you just won a piece, and you are doing great. And while in this scenario, it did come with a check, and with a knight and all this, there are many different versions of the Zwischenzug. It is a very important tactic, however, not very common. Number 18, this refers to all... Number 18, I have king endgame tactics. This refers to all the different types of tactics used in king and pawn endgames. Like here, you can play king d3, going for the opposition, and this refers also to things like triangulation and all that sort of stuff. While not the most common tactic, these are extremely important and something you really need to know. So, I mean, if you are planning to rise through the ranks, this is probably one of the most important things that you should learn as soon as possible. Number 17, I have the pawn breakthrough. This is another one that is very important in endgames, however, it has a little bit more scope. A pawn breakthrough is when you have usually an imbalance or something like this, and you can play a move here like h6, essentially sacrificing a pawn, because if black has nothing, you'll capture and promote, and if they take, well then it doesn't matter that you lost a pawn, because g7, and you're going to promote anyways. This one is extremely important in pretty much all endgames, and definitely something that you should have in your tool belt. Number 16, I have the mating net. This one is a more broad kind of tactic. The point here is that you meticulously, with usually a lot of pieces, take away every single square that the enemy king can go to, resulting in a future checkmate. Like this right here. While this example is a bit funny, this one is actually very important, especially in big attacks where the enemy king can go to a lot of places, because you need to make sure that you control every square that it can go to. 15, I have a tricky one to rank. I have the mate in 3+. This refers to all tactics where you need to get a checkmate in 3 or more moves. While obviously important, I do not think this is important as some other tactics, because even though a mate in 3, like, if you can spot it, it would be nice. Oftentimes in attacks, there is many other options. In this case, like here, yes, you can play rook to a6 check with the bishop, and after f6, takes, rook here, you can capture this with a checkmate in 3 moves. However, here, you can also play like rook takes an f7 check, and after rook g7, and takes here, even though you don't have an immediate checkmate, you are still winning, which happens very often. However, this is still very important, and so here it goes. Number 14, I have the pawn fork. Where would we be without the pawn fork? It's very simple. It is a fork being done with the pawn. This is extremely common, extremely useful, and I mean something very important that you should take care of. As you go higher in the levels, people are more wary of this and it gets a lot harder to do. However, at all levels, especially beginner, this is still a very important tactic that you should know. 13, I have the back rank. This occurs when the enemy king is behind usually 3 of their pawns like this, meaning that has no escape up. So that way, in a puzzle like this, you can play a very fun move, queen takes on d5, taking advantage of the fact that black now cannot take, because then rook comes into c8 with the check and the very quick checkmate, especially at beginner level. This one is murderous. So many beginners fall for tactics like this, and also it's not limited like some other ones, because there's so many fun tactical ideas like this one that I just showed you. A lot of people miss stuff like this, and so this is such an important tactic, and especially for beginner, keep this one in mind because it will come up. 12, I have the discovered attack. This is an extremely important one. This occurs when you move a piece that attack something else while you simultaneously reveal an attack on another piece, something like this right here. This is obviously extremely important and will occur in a lot of games. However, to be honest, it simply just isn't as common as some of the other ones, nor as important, but as you can see here, it still can occur and be absolutely devastating. However, it's not as important as some others. Number 11, I have the knight fork, which, I mean, is just so extremely important. A fork being done with the knight, I mean, this must occur every, like, 1 and 2 games. Extremely common, extremely important at all levels, and also there's a lot of depth, as in, there are a lot of tricky knight forks that usually involve, like, backwards knight moves that often can be very hard to spot. So if you can master this tactic, you will win a lot of your games. Extremely important. Let's move on. Number 10, I have the hanging piece. This might not be the most important tactic, but I dare you to find one that occurs more often. In every single chess game, at one point or another, there will be a piece here that has no defenders. Not like on e4, but somewhere a piece will have no defenders, and so often there is a tactic in this position. You have queen a4 check, with this fork taking advantage of the hanging piece. While not really a tactic on its own, it combines in conjunction with like basically every single other tactic. It is extremely important, and if you want to become at all good at chess, this must be something that you know. Number 9, I have remove the defender. This usually occurs when you have tension between two pieces, but when a piece is defended by only one other piece, something you can often do is capture that piece. Simply get rid of it. In this case, it comes with a check. That way, there's no longer, a piece defending another piece. So after like takes, that is just a free queen. And while here it ends up being a fun flashy tactic and winning a queen, this will occur so often in so many chess games. Not always for a queen. So often it's only for an extra pawn or to like eliminate stability of their center. Very important, something that you must know. Number 8, I have the battery. This is just one of, if not the most important attacking concept. You can stack two pieces, in this case a queen and a rook, and when you have something like this, you can supercharge it and launch it down any file or diagonal. Here, white is forcibly getting checkmated because there's no way they can avoid the queen coming into h1 or h2, and they are dead. Like I said, extremely important attacking concept. If you're attacking an enemy, you will most likely use this at some point or another. Yeah, not too much to say. Number 7, I have the bishop pin. This just occurs so often, most likely in this exact scenario with the knight and the queen, and honestly this one will likely not decide your game. There can be like some fun tactics, like here after like knight c3 you can launch your knight into d4, and white is already on the defensive here, but more often this occurs in so many games. If you know how to properly add pressure and attack them using this pin, you're going to win a massive number of your games just purely because this occurs in such a massive number of games. And it occurs so often, so important. Let's move on. Number 6, I have Zugzwang. This is another German word that refers to when you put your opponent in a position where every single move they play is going to end up hurting them. They have no good moves they can play. This is important in a lot of endgames, a lot of attacking ideas, but most importantly, I would say an idea that a lot of people just completely forget about, the basic checkmates. Like here, queen d5, and this basic checkmate with the queen, it would not work if Zugzwang is not a thing, because black here must move. They must go closer to the corners, allowing us to get closer and closer, and eventually we can force them to a position where they simply cannot make any progress. They can only go between these two squares. If black could just ignore a move and not play anything, then they would be golden. However, here we can now walk our king all the way up and quickly make a very nice checkmate. And remember, this would not work without Zugzwang, reinforcing why it is so extremely important. Number 5, I have a more broad one, the counter threat. This refers to when you are being attacked. Let's say white here plays bishop b4, attacking our rook, and how you respond to this threat is not by actually just moving your rook over and getting basically an even position, but instead initiating a counter threat. And here, this is why you always have to be on the lookout. You don't just move your rook over, you can play queen b6, and they are getting forked. White is going to end up losing a piece. So often this is going to happen. It's why when you see your piece being attacked, you cannot just get tunnel visioned and just move your piece over. You must always be on the lookout because options like this are so extremely important and so common. Number 4, I have the mate in 2. Compared to the mate in 3+, this one occurs way more often and is so extremely important if you are attacking. I mean, you must have checkmate on your mind and you must be spotting these because, like in this example, you have checkmate in 2. Knight takes with a check. Bishop must take back and queen comes in, quick checkmate, and simply because these are so extremely common, it must come in here at number 4. Number 3, I have the pin. This is an unbelievably important tactical idea that occurs in basically every single chess game. This is when you're pressuring a lower value piece against a higher value piece, meaning that they can never really move this guy anywhere because then the higher value piece behind it would end up getting captured. And I mean, this is so common. There are so many tactical possibilities that can come from this. And when I say common, I really mean it. This occurs in basically every single game. And just because of that alone, this is where it goes. Number 2, I have the fork. This is when you have a single piece that attacks 2 or more pieces, allowing them to move the highest value one, and then you can capture one and you win material. While not the most common, this is the most common way of actually winning material. In most chess games, there will end up being a fork, and it usually will end up being devastating. These are often very hard to spot, and really, these are just extremely important. If you want to be at all good at chess, you must have this tactic mastered. And at number 1, what else could it be? I have the mate in 1. If you are planning to win a chess game on something other than time or them resigning, you must know this, and this will occur in your game. I mean, what else is there to say? It's basically a checkmate. If you are attacking, you must know this idea. If you're an endgame, a middle game, an opening, you must know this idea. What else is there to say, honestly? This is the most important chess tactic by a mile. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching. Members get to pick future opening videos. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye!